Today's Tanya, for the 22nd day of Iyar, is in Perek Nun. It's on page 140. The number at the bottom of the page is 264. In Perek Nun, the Rebbe begins to explain a higher and deeper level of love than the types of love that were discussed in the earlier chapters. In the earlier chapters, the Rebbe spoke about various levels of love, but what they all had in common was that they were all basically within the experience of the human condition. In other words, it somehow served to fulfill and to satisfy the needs of the neshama, and in that way, the person remains a human being. He remains within the bounds of the human condition, and what this does, what this is geared for, is to enhance the mitzvahs that the person does. And in order to do mitzvahs, he needs to remain a human being. And as the Alter Rebbe said before, that love and fear that a person has for God are not independent ends in themselves. The virtue and the goodness or the greatness of love and fear is that it serves as wings for the mitzvah. In order for the mitzvah to rise, it has to have wings. So the love and the fear are the wings that help the mitzvah rise. But just as in the example of the bird and wings, the wings themselves are not the bird, are not a living creature. They're merely a detail within the bird. The important thing is the bird itself, the living being. So it's the mitzvah that is the important thing, and the essence, and the mitzvahs are the wings that help it fly, and the love and fear are the wings that help it fly. And so, whether it's only love, or fear, or it's kavanah, or it's the learning of Torah and understanding of Torah, all of these things are not the essence, because the essence is the doing of a mitzvah. The doing of a mitzvah is the essence, because that's how you make a dira b'tachtonos. So, the loves that were discussed in previous chapters are all of them geared to enhance the mitzvah, to serve as wings for the mitzvah, and in order for the person to do the mitzvah, he has to remain a human being. And therefore, the contemplation, the hisbonenus, that leads to that kind of love, to those kinds of love, are also hisbonenus of the greatness of God, but the kind of greatness that strengthens the person's existence. For example, one of the types of love that the Alter Rebbe explained in a previous chapter was the love of nafshi ivisicha, that we refer to God as our true soul, our real life, and because of it is ivisicha, that's why we long and we yearn for God, because He is life, just like a person yearns for his life. Another kind of love was the love of the child to the parents, the mishtadel bosar avui v'imei, and this too, if it's my parents, then in considering God my father, then my existence is strengthened, my existence is bolstered. I have a father. A father is close. A father gives life. A father protects, and so on. So my existence is not denied, but rather deepened and strengthened by these hisbonenus. Whereas the love that Alter Rebbe is going to describe here in Perek Nun, began to describe in Perek Nun, is a love that takes us away from the human condition. It is a desire, it is a stormy love that makes the neshama want to leave the human condition and expire into godliness. And that's why it's called Ava Karish Be'esh, because just as the flame of the fire tears itself away from the wick or from whatever it is that holds it down, and it wants to expire, it wants to stop existing rather than be stuck away from its source, in the same way the neshama wants to leave the body, wants to leave the human condition and become absorbed into godliness, even if that means losing its identity. This is natural in the neshama. As the Alter Rebbe says, it comes from the element of fire in the neshama. So that the love that is described here in Perek Nun is a love that comes from Gvura, whereas the types of love that were described earlier in the previous chapters, they are the loves that come from Chesed, from water, whereas this one is Gvura and fire. And just as water comes from above, flows downwards from above, in the same way the loves that were described in the previous chapters desire to bring godliness down. That's one kind of love. The desire to have what you love come closer to you or become more a part of you. To have more of what you love. And that love is called Ava Kamayim, because water flows downward, so it's Milmailo Lamata, bringing God into the world. In this love, in Perek Nun, Ava Kevish Pe'esh, the nature of fire is that it wants to get away from this world. It wants to rise from the lower condition to the higher condition. And that causes in the person the desire and the thirst and the Kleis HaNefesh of expiring and wanting to stop being in order to be with God. And how does this come about? What is the hisbonenus that leads to this kind of ahava? It is the hisbonenus of Kula Kamei Kelo Mamash. That's in consideration of the fact that all of existence is insignificant and nothing compared to God, because God is so far removed from the world that nothing about the world has any meaning or significance to Him. Therefore, in order to be part of Him, you have to tear yourself away from this condition and shed the properties of the human and physical world in order to become part of God, who is so far removed from the world. So in feeling the distance of God, in feeling the absolute gap that exists between Him and the world, that first of all, as the Alter Rebbe said, first of all it creates a stormy fire, and then it becomes, and this is described as Tzoma Nafshi, it is a thirst that the neshama feels, and that leads to Chelas Ava, a love sickness, because when the love is not satisfied, not requited, then it becomes love sickness. A person can actually get sick from it. And then it becomes Kleis HaNefesh. It becomes a literal expiring, where the neshama literally tears itself away from the body. And were it not for a special effort, as the Alter Rebbe will say later, if it's not for a special effort to keep the body and soul together, the soul would actually leave the body. And this is related to the level of the Levi, where the Kayan is Ish Chesed. The Ava Kedish Be'esh, the stormy fire, is related to the Levi, who is Gvura. And although the Levi is, at this time, second in importance to the Kayan, and here we're saying that the love that is represented by the Levi, the love of Gvura, is a higher love than the love of Chesed. So for this, the Alter Rebbe explains that in fact, when Mashiach comes, the Levi will be higher than the Kayin. And what is the Levi? The Levi's function is to raise up from the lower condition to the higher condition, which is the idea of song, because in the song you rise and then you settle back down, and that's called Zatzir V'Shuv. The desire to leave the body and the settling back down into the body. The advance and the retreat. And so the Levi, whose service is to raise up, is the element of Gvura. Gvura rises, tears itself away from its place in order to go higher, whereas Chesed is like water, it comes down from a higher place to the lower place. And in order to come to this level, it has to be through the avoidance of sin, that a person shouldn't be obstructed by the Avedis, and that he should be able to rise through this hisbonenus of Kula Kamei Kelo Choshiv, and that arouses the element of fire in the neshama, which produces this stormy love of Ava Kedish Be'esh. I want to take a second here to correct a mistake in yesterday's shiur. In the line 2/3 of the way down, in the line that begins with the word Shehi, the Alter Rebbe says, Shehi b'chinas ava aza, that this love is an intense love, kishal heves hayetim min habazak, as the flame that comes out of the bazak. And I translated bazak to mean lightning, which is a mistake, and it should be corrected also in the English Tanya. The bazak here means an oven in which gold is purified, and the flame from that oven shoots out at moments and then settles back down again, which is a reflection of the Ratzei V'Shuv. So it's a very intense flame, and it shoots to the surface and then settles back down again, as the Gemara says in Chagiga. And now, for today's Shia, the 22nd of Iyar, on page 140, towards the bottom of the page, 4 lines from the bottom to be exact, at the period. V'hinei seder ha'aveda b'etzek ha'teira v'ha'mitzvos hanimsheches me'bechinas ava azazu. What kind of aveda of teira and mitzvos results from this kind of ava? The earlier avas, the types of ava described in earlier chapters, they lead to the performance of teira and mitzvos because that is their whole purpose. The whole purpose is to strengthen and to give wings to the mitzvah so that the mitzvah can rise. But here, the person doesn't want to even want to exist. The ava is so intense that he wants to expire and not be at all. So at first glance, this wouldn't lead to any teira and mitzvahs at all. In order to do teira and mitzvahs, you have to be alive in a body. So the Alter Rebbe says, what kind of teira and mitzvahs does this lead to? And it must lead to a teira and mitzvahs, otherwise it wouldn't be a legitimate ahava. So the type of aved that this produces is hiba bechina shuv levad. It doesn't come directly from the ava, as in the other types of ahava, but the benefit of teira and mitzvahs from this ava comes indirectly through the shuv alone. What is the shuv? It says in the Sefer Yitzida, which is attributed to Adam Rishon. It says, that if your heart is racing, if your heart is excited, inspired, then return to the Echad. Pirush, what that means is, if your heart is racing, which is the longing of the neshama, which is in the right side of the heart, which is the place of the godly soul. Kishem mizgaberes, when it becomes intense, so mislaheves or mislaheter, and it is flamed b'me'ed ad kleis hanefesh mamosh, to the point of extinguishing itself and expiring literally. It would and is expiring unless something stops it. Lehishtapech el cheka via chayi hachayim baruch hu. It pours itself out to its Father, the source of all life, to God. The Lord says, it wants to leave the imprisonment of the body, which is physical and fleshly, in order to cleave to God. What he needs to recognize and take to heart is my marazal ki al korcha chatochai beguf hazeh lahachayesek. Mishnah says that a person has to recognize that he lives against his will. That although his will is to not live because he has considered the fact that kula can make a law choshiv, that all of existence is insignificant to God and very far from God and so on, and therefore he wants to leave this existence. He doesn't want to live, and the Mishnah says, that although it goes against your will, it goes against your feelings, but you have to remain alive in this body. Why? Because the purpose is to bring godliness down into this world through Torah, which is called Chayim. so that the dira b'tachtein for God's oneness will be b'bechinas gilui, will be revealed to the lower condition. And as he writes in the Zayat, that the achdus of the Eibishter, the way it is above, is what needs to come down and be revealed here below. Not a lesser achdus, not a lower level, but the same achdus that is above needs to come down below. And that is the meaning of echad be'echad, pidush, shehayichud hane'elam, that the oneness of God that is hidden from the world, that is higher than the world, yihiyeh b'bechinas almodiz galia, should come down into the revealed world. And this is by staying in the body and doing mitzvahs and bringing godliness into the world. And that's what the meaning is, l'chod deidi, likras kala. That likras kala, kala means kweis hanefesh. When the soul wants to expire, wants to leave the body. So to the neshama we say l'chod deidi, bring the beloved, bring God down into the world, and not expire and leave the world. And with this we'll understand that Mishnah that we mentioned earlier, etc. That a person lives against his will and also dies against his will. Which means that on the one hand he doesn't want to live and has to against his will. On the other hand, he doesn't want to die, but has to against his will. So how is it that, what should a person's will be, should he want to live and then be told that he must die, or should he want to die and then be told that he must live? So there's no explanation for this, other than the explanation given before. According to what we learned before, it's understood that a person has to reach a level where he wants to leave this world. Otherwise, he won't make a dira b'tachteinen. Otherwise, he will be the tachteinen. He will be the lower world, but he won't make it any more godly. So he has to disengage completely his desire to be part of the world, and he has to want to expire. And then he's told that he has to recognize that in spite of that desire, he has to stay and make a dira b'tachteinen, because that's God's purpose. In order to make a dira b'tachteinen, he has to do Torah and mitzvahs. And in order for the Torah and mitzvahs to be done properly, he has to do Torah and mitzvahs with enthusiasm and with a chayus. But if he's doing it against his will, he's forced to do it, so where will the excitement come from? So he has to go from the level, or from the stage in which he is forced to stay in this world, he has to come to a level where he is enthusiastic about it. Once he's enthusiastic about it, that he's excited about being in this world, he could again become comfortable with this world, and that would again interfere with his making it a dira b'tachteinen. So he then has to again arouse within himself the desire to leave this world, and then remind himself again that the kavanah is that he stay in this world, and this goes on constantly. So it's not as one would think from learning the Mishnah that a person at the beginning of life doesn't want to live but is forced to live. And then once he gets used to it, when it comes to the end of his life, he doesn't want to die but he's forced to die. The way the Alter Rebbe is explaining it, this is not an experience that happens once at the beginning of life and once at the end. It is a constant to and fro friction with the world, in that he always needs to want to leave the world, and he always needs to accept upon himself the purpose for which God created him, and that is to stay in the world. And as this is explained at length elsewhere, and this is accomplished when a person feels that he's on the verge of expiring, and that he's going to leave the physical condition because he wants to become closer to God, how does he have the strength at that moment and during such intense feelings? How does he have the strength to refuse and to come back and settle back into the body? So on this, the Alter Rebbe says that it comes be'ezras chai hachayim baruch, that you have to have help from above in order to be able to do this. And there's a famous story when the Alter Rebbe would learn Chassidus with the Maggid's son, with Rebbe Avram, the Malach, that the Malach wouldn't be able to survive the intensity of the inspiration and of the ecstasy, were it not that the Alter Rebbe would bring him back by giving him a bagel, by giving him something physical to reattach him to the physical world. And as the Malach once said, that he doesn't understand how it is that the Alter Rebbe, after he finishes learning Inyan Chassidus, he can then eat a bagel with butter. By him, by the Malach, after learning Inyan Chassidus, he can't eat for 3 days. So there needs to be Ezras Chaya Chayim Baruch Hu in order to be able to make that switch from the desire to expire to the settling back down, the shul, settling back down into the mission and to the purpose for which we were created. In the Hayom today, the 22nd of Iyar and the 37th of the Eimer, the Rebbe writes that there was once a Fabringen of Hasidim, early Hasidim, in the year 1787 or 88, and the point of their discussion at the Fabringen was that the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, accomplished and brought about the fact that we are not alone. Because once upon a time, before the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe, meaning the Rosh Yeshiva or the Goin, was alone, and his students, his disciples, were alone. The way of Hasidus, which the Alter Rebbe established, which was a great divine accomplishment, and the accomplishment was that the Rebbe is not alone and Hasidim are not alone.